Rick changed the whole landscape of hip-hop music. The problem became Rick got involved in the music business. So this was staying up late at night, started wearing sunglasses at night. He never saw the sun. So over a period of time, over a decade, he got to be 400 pounds, okay? His biology started to fall apart, even though he was very successful. Then he started to do other music. He started to do Metallica. He started to do Adele. He started to do Aerosmith. In other words, his client list got bigger and bigger and bigger because his effect on the music business was huge. But as he got more successful, he got more sick biologically. And that's how he and I crashed together. He began to follow me. And then one of the guys who co-wrote his book with him, Neil Strauss, who used to be the editor of Rolling Stone magazine, Neil runs a very interesting group that you'd be very hard-pressed to find. Basically takes care of millionaires to try to optimize their health. And Neil asked me to come out and speak to the group, I don't know, about 10 years ago in Los Angeles. And Rick was one of those guys. And Rick had told me he'd already been following me and doing all the things he was doing. And he already changed his life substantially. He was down like 150 pounds. He was no longer running his business the way he was doing it. He was a real big believer in CT. In fact, he built the CT deck in his house in Malibu. That actually was highlighted on a podcast he did with Tim Ferriss. He spent over $1 million on it. And then I kept pushing him. I said, Rick, you got to get out of Malibu. So he did that. He went to a better latitude. Then when he was there, he hit plateaus. He said, you got to get out of there further. So he went further south. And then it coalesced in a medical problem that he had, that he contacted his friends, but also the people that he respected in medicine. And two of the guys that he contacted were me and Peter Attia. And Rick told me what the situation was with his heart, that he had a big problem that was going to require surgery. And he said, is there anything unusual or from a biohack perspective that I could come up with that would help him out? And that's where I came up with the idea to use methylene blue for him while he was on cardiovascular bypass. And he didn't care about why it worked. He said, if you tell me it's something I should do, I'm going to do it. But I warned him, if he talked to the surgeon would probably have an issue with it. He talked to Peter Attia about it. Peter Attia told him it was crazy. The way the story goes. But Rick trusted me enough as the decentralized person. He said, I don't think Jack is going to bullshit me. So he started to use the methylene blue right after his surgery. And long story short, Rick had a remarkable recovery, with his surgery. He still uses it to this very day. The surgery he had was very, very risky, very risky. He told the story in the podcast. That's the main reason I went to Malibu, is because I never spoke about it publicly, ever. It's a person's, private medical history. But when Rick said that we could do the podcast together, that he'd be okay talking about it now, he told the story that 3 months after the surgery, Peter Attia came back to him and said, you know what? I've been looking into the papers around methylene blue, and he goes, this was brilliant that Jack told you about this. He goes, I would have never thought about this. And the reason for you guys, the reason why the story is important, it highlights the difference between centralized and decentralized medicine. And see, anything about methylene blue and where it came from. It was the first drug that was actually used to treat tuberculosis. We would use to see things on a slide. It was also something that started out as a dye, and then it turned out the guys that were at the beginning of biochemistry, like the two guys that were influential in the TCA cycle and vitamin C biology, Linus Pauling and Albert St. Georgi, they understood that methylene blue did something very unusual both with electrons and protons in the TCA cycle. They could never figure out what it was, but they knew it was something quite beneficial for, energy metabolism when it was broken. And Since that time, we know a lot more information about it, but you don't know a lot of information about it as a centralized physician. Why? Because the drug is off patent. It's not patentable. That means it's not profitable. Big pharma. That's the reason why nobody knows about it. So the reason I brought it to the table is Uncle Jack scours medical history to look for those kind of stories so that we can plug it in to the right diseases that can help certain people. And when I explained to Rick, kind of why I thought it would help, he said, okay, I'm going to do it. And of course, the bad thing about this story is that many people now on the internet want to use methylene blue because Rick used it. And that's not the right way to do things. You have to use it for the right indications. And unfortunately, most people don't do it that way. They just decide in the biohacking community, okay, I'm going to do this because I think I can do it. And I don't like to see that kind of stuff happen. The thing that I appreciated about the story is that it highlighted the difference between centralized and decentralized medicine, but it also showed that a doctor like Peter Attia, who's very centralized, who's very closed-minded like I was 20 years ago, has the opportunity to still adapt and change.